What's up, everybody, and welcome to your Thursday edition of Pelicans Daily, brought to you by Fan Arch. I'm your host, David Grubb, editor in chief of thebirdrights.com. Um, Pelicans still have two home games remaining this week. Obviously, they take on the Golden State Warriors on Friday at the Smoothie King Center, and then the Charlotte Hornets come to town on Sunday. So we'll take a look at those two games, and then we'll get into a couple more things. We'll talk about Zion Williamson, the latest trade rumors with him. We'll talk about Jordan Hawkins, and we'll also talk about what the NBA can do to stop tanking. I mean, that's become the topic du jour. Every year we start talking about this, and I think that there's really only one way to do it. So we'll talk about that to close the show today. So, again, we're starting with the Pelicans. Two home games this week: Golden State Warriors, Charlotte Hornets. Um, this game is really important to the Warriors, quite frankly. I mean, usually it's a given that the Warriors are going to come to town and beat the Pelicans, but the Warriors are never the Warriors when they don't have Steph Curry, and he likely will not play. Steve Kerr sending a message to the Warriors that this game could be the most important game of the season for them. Um, the Pelicans obviously don't have a lot going for them as far as the high end level of talent they're supposed to have. Um, you know, Outside of CJ McCollum, who will probably play after he took a rest in the game against the Sixers. Um, no Herb Jones, no DeJounte Murray, no Trey Murphy. And Zion Williamson, still dealing with his back issue. We'll find out if he's available um, for the game. But the Pelicans could once again, like they did against the Sixers, basically send out young players, backups, and guys who will not be on the roster next year. Um, that doesn't mean that they couldn't win that ball game. As much as we've talked about tanking before, we'll talk about it again. But these guys go out; they have something that they want to do. This is their job. This is their profession. So they do want to go out and compete, not just for their jobs, but against their peers. So there's a chance, yes, the Pelicans could win the ball game. The Warriors have won 7 of their last 10, um, but they are a dangerous team. They are not the Warriors, the peak Warriors of their dynasty. Um, they are an aging team in a lot of ways, but they're also a young team in a lot of ways as well. A lot of young players have stepped into more prominent roles this season and have done a great job. Obviously, the acquisition of Jimmy Butler is a thing that everybody's focused on right now. Um, but it seems like, again, if Steph isn't there, it doesn't matter. The Warriors can have Jimmy Butler and everything that they still have, but without Steph Curry, it doesn't work. Jimmy Butler makes what they do easier when Steph is on the floor, but you have to have Steph Curry for the Warriors to win in the playoffs. But again, one game in New Orleans is a whole different story. Steph has been dealing with the pelvic injury; he's day to day. So and Steph rarely has played in his games in New Orleans over the last several years with the Warriors. He's taken the New Orleans trip off for whatever reason, whether the Warriors have felt like they could compete without him, whether it's the way the schedule just happened to fall on his rest times. You've not seen a lot of Steph Curry in New Orleans. Pelicans fans have not gotten to watch him. When they have gotten to watch him, they have not enjoyed him because usually it involves Steph knocking the Pelicans out of the playoffs. Uh, the last few times that he's been on the floor, those have been kind of the stakes. It feels like um, the big area to watch in this game, as far as what happens on the floor. If we're looking for a statistical area for the Pelicans to try to win, it's always the offensive glass. Rebounding is such a big reason why the Pelicans have been so bad this season. The Warriors are one of the teams that's really good at getting second chance points. The Pelicans are pretty good at getting second chance points. Misi is one of the better offensive rebounders in this league. The Warriors are going to attack the offensive glass, and you don't want to allow them those second chance opportunities to them to kick back out for open 3 pointers. We know that the second chance 3 pointers may be the most dangerous shot in all of basketball. It seems like just the propensity for that shot to go down and spark runs or extinguish runs It is a big mood shift type of shot. So the Pelicans want to do a good job of limiting those second chance opportunities against the Warriors. Then on Sunday the Pelicans get the Charlotte Hornets. Um, Charlotte is like the Pelicans much more than they like the Warriors, in the sense that right now the only thing they're competing for is position as far as lottery odds go. They've been out of the playoff picture for a good long time. Pelicans are out of the playoff picture. Um, they're in some ways two teams that are similar, teams that have immensely talented lead players. If you're talking about LaMelo Ball or Zion Williamson, both who were injury prone, um, and that has hampered their careers in a lot of ways. Neither has had postseason success. Um, you have teams that are looking for identities. I think Charlotte has been trying to figure that out since they came back. First is the Bobcats, and now is the Hornets. What is their basketball identity? I think that's why they brought in Charles Lee to be their head coach, was to change the cultural dynamic in Charlotte. The Pelicans have struggled to find an identity. I think when Willie Green got here, his identity was to make this a tough team, to make this a team that played solid defense. They got better at that, not against the best teams, but they got much better defensively enough to compete to where they were winning games, but they didn't have enough of an identity. They couldn't figure out what New Orleans Pelicans basketball was supposed to be. And I think that's why both of these teams are kind of in the situation that they are in. Both, again, going to be in the top five of the lottery, most likely. Both, again, trying to figure out if they should build around injured stars. Both, again, with decent complementary pieces, whether you're talking about Brandon Miller for Charlotte or you're talking about Trey Murphy for the Pelicans. And then some other guys who are around there that you're hoping you can get really good contributions from. Guys with talent and upside of varying ages across the league. Um, there are similarities between these teams, unfortunately. I think for both of them, if you say, wow, uh, the Pelicans are like the Hornets, Pelicans fans are like, we don't want to be compared to them. Hornets fans, vice versa, but they're inexplicably connected forever due to their histories. Obviously, with the original Hornets coming to New Orleans 3 years ago, and then obviously the expansion Bobcats becoming the Hornets and assuming the mantle of the original franchise, taking those records with them as well. Um, Neither one of these teams is going to finish the season strong, but I guess there are always opportunities for those young players. The coaches are coaching to win. The players are playing to win. Whether they have the talent or the skill to do that is a whole other question. And those organizations will deal with those in the offseason. But when they play on Sunday, both teams, both sets of players, both coaching staffs will be doing their best to win. Um, you know, Obviously that hasn't gone too well for either one of those teams this season. Um, let's talk about the latest trade rumors involving Zion Williamson and why Zion's name kind of keeps coming up in these trade rumors. And I think as long as the Pelicans are underachieving as an organization, Zion Williamson's name is going to be attached. He's the highest profile player in the organization and a very high profile player around the NBA. So people are going to be interested in his career. People are going to speculate about his career, about what could be a better fit for him as long as he's not winning in New Orleans. So once again, Zion is attached to a big market team, this time the Los Angeles Lakers. The Lakers, who always are looking for another star to pair with LeBron James and now with Luka Doncic. They are looking around the league to see what stars might be available. There aren't a lot of league shifting stars. I mean, Giannis Antetokounmpo has been somebody that they've eyed, and I think that they're looking for someone who can score on the inside, because what Luka and LeBron do is so much more predicated on playing on the outside, on the perimeter, except when LeBron's in transition. So in the half court, who's going to be that person who kind of provides that interior balance, scoring wise? And also can provide some gravity to take pressure off of LeBron as he continues to age, and Luka, who is a ball dominant guard but needs his space to operate as well. So, um, obviously the Pelicans and the Lakers have a history, of course. There's animosity on the court, there's animosity off the court. Of course, the Anthony Davis deal at the center of a lot of this stuff going. You could go back further to the Chris Paul situation where Chris Paul was almost traded to the Lakers, and then that trade was eventually rebuffed by the league, who owned the Pelicans at the New Orleans Hornets at the time. Um, there's a lot of animosity over the years, um, and so that is the first major roadblock here. But then you have the reality of this. Zion is playing the best all around basketball of his career. He's averaging career highs in rebounds, assists, steals, and blocks. He's staying relatively healthy this season, though, right now. He's dealing with this lower back contusion, which at this stage of the season, considering that the stakes are low, you, you excuse the Pelicans if, let's say, we're just for the sake of argument, they're being overly cautious with Zion's health right now. There are no stakes. There's no rush to bring him back. Yes, they'd like to have him for home games, and maybe spark a little bit more interest from the fan base. But by and large, they've sold the tickets they're going to sell. So if they have to keep him sidelined because there's even a minor injury, just to make sure that they don't incur any additional uh, injury to Zion before the end of the season, then so be it. Um, career highs across the board. He's third in the NBA in per 36 scoring. He's giving the kind of consistency that Pelicans fans have wanted his entire career as far as his level of play on both ends of the floor. The idea that the Pelicans would go into this offseason after what they've gone through, you've already traded Brandon Ingram. You know that going into next season, you're going to be down three primary rotation players, depending on how your rotation falls. In Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, and DeJounte Murray. Those players are off the table to start the season. How long, we'll find out. But I would generally err on the side of saying, and I could be wrong, but let's say as of today, Trey and Herb will not start the regular season, will not start game one. They may be back soon after that, but game one, I would say no. The Pelicans, unless you get the number one pick, that again, I've said this before, unless the Pelicans get the number one pick and they're able to take Cooper Flag, there's no possibility in my mind of the Pelicans choosing to trade Zion Williamson in general. Add to that the Lakers level of this, that the New Orleans Pelicans would have to go to their fan base. Pelicans would go to their fan base after they've already given the other number one pick in the history of the franchise to the Lakers. You lost that trade. That's what you'd have to say at this stage. Though the Lakers have already moved on from Anthony Davis, they did get the one championship. And to them, and to Pelicans fans, would you rather have had Anthony Davis and the Lakers not have a championship and not have done what you did? Or would you go back and repeat all of what you did again with the Lakers and end up with right where you are today? So to think that David Griffin could be the guy who traded Anthony Davis to the Lakers and then turned around and traded Zion Williamson to the Lakers, and all the Pelicans could get back, the best that they could hope for is Austin Reeves and other stuff. You can't sell that. You can't sell that. If David Griffin is going to try to sell anything else, whether it's he decides to keep Willie Green as head coach, whether he decides to not make any major trades this offseason, he has a better chance of getting those things past the public than going to the public, than standing in front of the world and explaining why he traded Zion Williamson to the Los Angeles Lakers. This can't happen. The Pelicans are not in a position where they have to trade Zion at this stage. They're not forced to do it financially. They're not forced to do it contractually. They're not forced to do it by any pressure from Zion's camp or around the league. They do not have to trade him. They have some pieces. They Generally, health has been the number one issue dogging the franchise. They have a you can correct some of the other issues this offseason. You can add to the roster. That is possible. You can get a better coach. That is possible. You can add talent through the draft. All these things are possible. What is not possible in this offseason or the next, or maybe even the one after that, is that there is not a way for the Pelicans to trade Zion Williamson and find a player of equal value in return. This is not going to happen. There are very few players who, when you go into a playoff series, can be the single best player in that series and carry a team past another team. Zion is one of those players. There are very few teams in this league that you look at and you put a healthy NBA squad next to Zion Williamson and you say, give him a chance to beat that other team 4 times out of 7. 4 times out of 7. Not just on one day, even though that the odds would still be pretty high for most teams. A healthy squad and a healthy Zion Williamson. Give me that one game, can they beat you? There's very few players that if you say, give me your healthy squad versus Zion's healthy squad, that you're just going to flat out say the other team and not consider Zion. So if you give him up to the Lakers for Austin Reeves and what is sure to be another low set of Lakers draft picks, how do you tell your fan base that? When you're trying to get a new stadium in New Orleans, when you're trying to raise ticket prices, you're trying to get things, you want to attract free agents, you want to do all this stuff, you're going to trade Zion Williamson for Austin Reeves. Nico Harrison would look like Jerry West compared to David Griffin if that's the move that gets made. I think that there are going to continue to be rumors about Zion again until the Pelicans make a playoff run of some sort, or until Zion says publicly that he doesn't want to be in New Orleans. There will always just be rumors. Um, I don't think that the public needs to pay attention to them until you hear something. And I think with Zion, the day that he's done with New Orleans, I think it will be readily apparent. When he doesn't want to play here anymore, it'll be readily apparent. I think his camp, and I think Zion himself, he is not a young man who strikes me as someone with a great poker face. So I would say, for the time being, Pelicans fans, you're better off resting easy that Zion isn't going anywhere. Um, but his name will continue to come up in discussions because other teams are always going to want him. There's always going to be somebody willing to take a risk on his level of talent. So, uh, what that really means is that the Pelicans still have a valuable asset. That's where I would take it. A player who at one time may have been considered a really good asset is not looking so much like a really good asset, and I think that's Jordan Hawkins. And if you do follow me on social media, um, particularly on Blue Sky, I'm there more frequently. Um, Jordan Hawkins is a target of mine. Not because I have anything against Jordan Hawkins. I don't. When somebody comes into a league, you always hope that they succeed. In life, I hope people succeed. I don't have that kind of animus towards anybody in general. But when it comes to Jordan Hawkins, I am continuously shocked by the level of leeway that he is given, considering his lack of production. Um, people will compare him to Trey Murphy, and I don't think there's a comparison at all to Trey Murphy. Um, I think Jordan Hawkins has gotten a very long leash as a player, um, considering his limitations. The one thing you knew from Trey was that Trey was, gave you exceptional size at his position, exceptional athleticism at his position, and was supposed to be filling in need as a shooter. Trey's profile from college was that he was a shooter. Trey's numbers as a rookie indicated that he was a shooter. They've gotten better since, but he's always been a shooter. When Jordan Hawkins was drafted, he was running to have two skill sets: shooting and intangibles. And we've all seen the intangibles. Jordan is a feisty dude. He endeared himself to New Orleans folks very quickly because of that. I think a lot of people see New Orleans in him, though he is not a Louisiana native. But people see that New Orleans fire in him. I get it. That's why players become fan favorites, and usually bench guys become fan favorites more than anybody else because their job is to bring energy, and when they play well, you notice. Starters have the expectation every night of playing well, but when you come in off the bench and you do well, particularly on a night when starters haven't, it really stands out. People, you know, um, kind of gravitate towards that. Home fans, always have a deep allegiance to the bench. Everybody knows the starters. Home fans know the bench, and so, um, I think it's easy for a reserve, and especially when you come in and you have a skills you have supposedly have a skill set that the fan base is looking for. If you're a football team and your team has never had a quarterback, people love the quarterback. People give the quarterback a lot of leeway, even if he's showing that he's not worthy of being the starting quarterback. There's always that kind of blindness, and I think there's a blindness towards Jordan Hawkins because from year one to year two, he's not gotten better. In fact, he's mostly gotten worse than he was from his rookie year. And he's been given more minutes. He's been given more starts. He's been given more opportunities to play a significant role. Whereas last year, he was an overall positive when he was on the court. This year, he's an overall negative. He was an overall negative this season. His shooting is down. He's shooting just 33% from 3-point range. He shot 36% last year, though his effective field goal percentage is down to 47% overall. Um, among the shooters who take as many shots as he does, he's not shooting it well. He's one of the worst in the NBA. He doesn't put together consistent weeks of basketball, like just going from night to night. Getting two consecutive games together is difficult for him. And it's not from a lack of opportunity because he's averaging consistently between 23 and 25 minutes a game over the past 2 months. Over the past 2 months, Jordan is playing consistently, you know, regular minutes, 24 minutes a game since the start of February. 24 minutes a game. That's two full quarters of basketball every night. And in that, he's still only shooting 33.8% from 3-point range. He's been given the opportunity to start games, 3 starts during that time. He's been given opportunities to contribute in multiple ways, but he doesn't rebound the ball well. He doesn't pass the ball well. He doesn't defend even poorly. Defending poorly would be an upgrade for him, but he doesn't defend poorly. He doesn't score efficiently. And he's not even an exceptional free throw shooter. He shoots below 80% from the free throw line. You add in the fact that he's been injured as well, that he is undersized because he's a 2 guard but he's not very big. He's not able to impose his will physically on either the offensive or the defensive end. And I hear people who talk about, well, if he had a better coach, he had a better coach, he'd be better. Now, you could argue that maybe they might do some things differently, but player development in the NBA, there's this bad idea that player development in the NBA is on coaching staffs and that some teams develop young players better than other teams. Now, I would say instability doesn't do anything good for player development, organizational instability, whether it's firing people at the front office or firing people in coaching staff year to year. That doesn't do good for it. But in the NBA, primarily, player development is on the player. There is not a lot of practice during the regular season. The off season is when players get better, and that is on the player because they are generally not in the facility during the off season. If they are and they're working out with the team, but it's still the player has to set the pace there. The team can't mandate what that player does. They will give them a plan for the off season, but if the player doesn't show up, the player doesn't do it, they can't fine them for non-mandatory workouts. It's on the player. How you get better is on the player. Jordan Hawkins has been given the opportunity. And people say, well, he's only getting to play because people got hurt. That tells you a lot about Jordan Hawkins, too, because what you can do is make sure somebody doesn't take you out of the lineup. You can not take advantage of your minutes. Now, you can argue about what the kind of minutes he's been given, but when you look at the shot attempts that he's getting, Jordan Hawkins is getting 10 field goal attempts per game over the last 2 months. 10 shot attempts per game. That's a good number of field goal attempts for a guy who's not a primary player. 10 shot attempts every night. He's getting 6 3-point attempts every night. So he's taking most of his shots from the area he's supposed to be taking shots from. He's not making them. He's not making them. He rarely this season has put together nights where he shot above 40% from 3-point range. That's why he's so low with his 3-point shooting. You're not asking for 8 out of 10. You're not asking for 7 out of 10. You're asking for give me 37, 38% on a consistent basis. And he's not been able to do that at any point of his career. Shooters are always shooters. Jordan doesn't make shots. So, how is that Willie Green's fault? For all the things you can indict Willie Green over, you could say he doesn't give you any strategic advantage. I'm with you. He doesn't do rotations well. Got it. Doesn't have an offensive idea. Okay, we're on the same page. But if you're going to tell me that it's Willie Green's fault that Jordan Hawkins can't shoot, then you got to explain that to me a lot better. How is it Willie Green's fault that Jordan Hawkins can't shoot? The one thing he's supposed to be able to do, he can't do it. And tell me then, if it's Willie Green's fault that Jordan Hawkins can't shoot, then why is Antonio Reeves able to shoot the ball so well? And he's getting less time. He's getting less opportunity. But Antonio Reeves, when he comes in the game, he's making his shots. He hasn't got nearly as many, but he's made 22 of his last 42 3-point attempts. 22 of his last 42. Okay. When he's getting the opportunity to shoot the basketball, you can argue about the other parts of his game. But if we just this boil it down to this one skill, one kid is a second round pick, the other kid is a first round pick. Who's shooting the ball better? Who's shooting the ball better? It's Antonio Reeves. It's not Jordan Hawkins. It's not Jordan Hawkins. And I think it's time that Pelicans fans start understanding and start wrapping their minds around the fact that Jordan Hawkins doesn't have a long-term future in New Orleans. He probably doesn't have a long-term future in the NBA. That's what I would say. He does not have a future in the NBA. Not long term. The end of his contract could be the end of his NBA career. He's going to have to go to the G League and completely rebuild his game. And I think that's the fact of the matter is that Jordan Hawkins is going to have to go to the G League and change his game if he wants to stay in the NBA. I could be wrong. I could be wrong, but you'll tell me if I'm wrong another time. I'm sure. I'm sure there will be plenty of people. If I'm wrong, there will be plenty of people to tell me how wrong I am. All right. Finally, we talk about stopping tanking, and I'm going to give you this opinion, and I've given this opinion before, and people tend to not like this opinion, but it is my firm belief the only way to stop tanking is to end the NBA draft. I'm against sports drafts anyway. There's no evidence that sports drafts make leagues better. There's none whatsoever. I've given you the numbers about number one picks in the NBA and how few of them win championships with the teams that draft them. Teams tend to end up right where they are. Bad teams are bad teams for a reason, and it's not because they've not been given enough picks. Bad teams are bad teams because they have bad owners and bad management, and they take bad players. That's what happens. You can't get one good player and offset an organization of bad players. Can't do it. It's hard for any one player to do it. You got to still flush out the rest of the bad players till you figure out the right ones. Simply adding LeBron James did not make the Cavs a champion. They had to get other players, right? LeBron had to leave, go to Miami, come back, find a new mix of players. Took several of those. How many players does a team go through even when they find that generational player? How many players are left from the start of Steph Curry's career to now? How many players were on that first team, um, with Kareem and Magic in 1980? And how many were on that last team in 1989? I mean, 88, excuse me, 88. So when you look at that and you say there's going to be change no matter what, it's the organizations who build around their star players because you're given the opportunity. You've been given the opportunity to take guys number one, number two, number three overall. Hasn't helped your team. Why have the bad teams been bad teams for so long? And when they get good, what changed? Was it that they suddenly got a bunch of number one picks, or they made the right picks? And people will say, well, all the players then will go to the same cities. They'll all want to play for the same teams. There's still only so much playing time and there's still only so much money. Players want playing time and players want money. There ain't but 12 roster spots playing for the Lakers. You still have your salary cap, even though that's a conversation for another time. But your draft doesn't help. It rewards incompetency by front offices more than it helps bad teams get good. You're giving bad teams good players and you're ruining people's careers before they even get started. Just because an organization thinks that the player is a good fit for them doesn't mean that that's the case. And just like in any job interview, when you're given the opportunity to sit in front of an employer, you get to learn about that organization as much as they get to learn about you. You get to ask questions of them before both of you decide. I mean, it's yes, in all these levels, there's a one-sidedness to the decision of the person who has the money. They have to want the other person. But there is, ultimately two parties making the choice. I'd like you to work for me. Do I want to work for you? You know, at different points. But in the NBA, it starts with you have to work for me, essentially. And yes, you could say, well, you don't have to play in the NBA. It goes, there's only one NBA. And you are subject to the rules of the NBA whenever you try to come back. And that's essentially a monopoly. But ultimately, if players don't have the opportunity to choose where they go, they don't have the opportunity to test the franchise. And so those pressures get exerted in other ways in the player power movement. I think the biggest way to empower organizations and players is to eliminate the draft because players are not beholden by where they were taken, their spot in the draft. That stops mattering. What matters is the team you went to, Does it fit? Am I going to get the kind of coaching that I want? Am I going to get the playing style that I like? And the team really gets to know that the player that they're getting wants to be with them. And as long as there's money available, players will go to those other cities. You say, well, nobody wants, unless you take them. Well, this is the point then. You're still getting them young. And then it's your job to convince them. It should not punish, you can't punish the player because the organization can't get right. You're putting my career in jeopardy because you think this team deserves to be good for no other reason than it exists. Come on now. People who love capitalism so much, you sure don't mind your socialism in your sports. But anyway, but anyway, I think that's the way you disincentivize tanking. If there's no draft and there's no way to get the number one pick in that draft, if all of the rookies go into a pool and they get to meet with teams and teams have a pool of money that they can spend on their rookies, then you are making sure that all the rookies don't go to one place. The fact that the have limited roster size means that they won't be going to the same place. Having a salary cap ensures that everybody's not going to the same place. But what you will get is teams competing all the way to the end because they've got to impress the next generation of players that, hey, this is an organization worth joining because we are ascendant for these reasons. We do the right things, we hire the right players, we're on our way up, and we need you to get there. Isn't that a much better pitch than we are trash? We have been trash. We were the worst team in the league this year. We had no hope of doing anything but being bad so we could get you and put all the pressure on you to save our organization. No, no, that doesn't work. Doesn't work. Let's try it. Let's just try it. Let's do a cycle of it. Let's do a decade of no draft and let's see what happens. If nothing changes, then still don't need a draft, right? If it gets better, I win. If it doesn't, you can go back to having your draft. And what was the loss? What was the loss? Let's give it a shot. Anyway, that's a wrap for this episode of Pelicans Daily. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Let me know what you think about everything we've talked about. And you can also follow me on social media at DM Grubb. Don't forget to check out thebirdrights.com for more Pelicans coverage. Until the next time, take care.